right, I think maybe we can get started. So before I hand over to Alben, again, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So a quick introduction. My name is Shumin Yo. I'm actually overseeing the education piece for ATMA. So before we dive in today's exciting session with Alben on the topic of the mobility multiplier on how do we increase the value of mobility using data, I thought I just want to take another moment to share with you all something that's very exciting that is happening on September 25th right here in Singapore. In fact, for ATMA, we'll be hosting a conference over here in Singapore. So the full day event is designed where we are bringing together not just the corporate HR and mobility professional, but basically all our partners and the industry stakeholders to again explore the future of talent mobility across Asia. So shortly, later I'll be putting on the ATMA conference link into the chat. And the theme around the conference really centered around, I would say, three pillars: connection, innovation, and impact. And the sessions are actually designed that will span across in terms of the strategic mobility planning, the ESG integration. And at the same time, I'm also inviting a speaker to come in and to share more tips in terms of how we can get visible. So it's really a fantastic opportunity. And I hope that I can engage with my peers over here as we continue to learn from top leaders in the industry. So again, back to today's topic. Very happy for me to be able to invite Alben over here to really speak about how we can leverage data to elevate the mobility program in order to provide that strategic value. In fact, I still remember that several years back, when I first got to know Alben, although I never tell him this, he's probably hearing it for the first time too. He was really one of the first few who spoke about how we as mobility professional can actually use data to elevate our pitch at the table. So that's why I thought that it's important for us to continue, to share his journey. So without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to Alben to kick off today's session. Alben, go ahead.
Thank you, Shumin. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you virtually, but it's an honor to be able to showcase at least some of the knowledge that I have using data in terms of my career, how it progressed, how it helped me grow my career in mobility, and ATMA is an organization that's actually close to my heart. Like, I feel like we have various different industry associations available not only in Asia but across the globe. But I feel like ATMA has carved itself like its own, like a niche in terms of like providing a lot of thought leadership when it comes to very interesting topics like ESG. And now we're talking about data. So definitely, I encourage everyone to continue supporting ATMA, and we're happy to have you here with us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world. So just a quick introduction about myself. So currently I'm with KPMG. So I'm Director of Global for Mobility Consulting Services. Overall, I have around 15 years of HR/mobility experience across the industry. I used to work at an RMC, Grable as Senior Director for Business Intelligence. And previously I worked in HPE for 8 years, having various HR roles and then mobility as well for the last maybe 4 years of my stint at HPE. So definitely a lot of learnings, not only within mobility, but across HR. So I actually did some project management stints when it comes to workforce planning, talent acquisition, HR compliance. So one of the key things I learned throughout my career is it's important to have that systems mindset when it comes to looking at how you attack problems, how you showcase your program, how you deal with your stakeholders. And that's how I was able to grow my career. So my expertise includes more on the data analytics side, data visualization like dashboards, analyzing data like finding root causes, and eventually like finding those interesting insights and stories that we can then leverage to build strategies and to build action plans afterwards. So as I grew my career across HR and mobility, that's when I got more exposed towards policy and process improvements, strategy development. So kind of like a full circle moment. for me in terms of having that corporate HR experience and then moving to the provider and professional service side. And then just some interesting personal things about me. So I'm married with 2 kids. I'm currently based in Singapore, originally from the Philippines. And then I have an engineering background. So not your traditional HR route, but it's something that I try to apply from time to time, especially on the data side. Okay, so before we get started, let's just do a quick polling from the team for everyone who's here. Just want to understand and get your perspective in terms of where you are with regards to your data journey. And then let's see if we can get the poll running. So hopefully you can see the poll in front of you right now. So we just want to get a pulse first of where you are in your current data analytics journey. And you just want to understand whether how I guess the progress you've been making, whether you've started already, you're making progress, you're an expert, or maybe you're not sure, and that's why you're here in this session. So we just want to get a pulse to see also how we can frame the conversations later on. At the same time, if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to use the chat box. We'll make sure to read all through your questions, and we value your feedback and thoughts as we move forward. We want to keep this as informal as possible, so please do exchange ideas as we go through the next hour. Okay, so a good handful of you are making progress, which is good. You may be bashful, no one's claiming to be an expert yet. And then a few of you haven't started and there's one who's not sure. So definitely very interesting. And then you can really see the diversity in terms of the audience. So it's very interesting to get to know more about you. And then hopefully this session will allow you to be inspired or at least have some ideas when it comes to how you apply data in your job. Okay, so some of you might be thinking, like, before we go to the data part, like I know, like, you read the title of the session. It says like how you increase the value of mobility, and some of you might be curious, like, why do I need to increase the value of mobility in the first place, right? So like what's like, I'm already quite comfortable with my job. We're busy enough as it is. So why do we need to increase the value? The unfortunate truth is the world is really changing, especially after COVID and the rise of AI. We're also seeing a lot of companies um, change how they do their cross-border deployment or international deployment of employees. So that what that means is that we're seeing less of the traditional expat assignments, short-term, long-term, and even permanent transfer. And we're seeing a lot more fluidity when it comes to moving people across the globe. So it's more like business travel, commuters. So there are new emerging types of moves that are happening, even remote working, as you've seen across the years. So it's important that you're able, if especially if part of it is not inclusive of your scope, then you have to adjust to the times. That means you have to show the value that you have in terms of supporting the business needs. Otherwise, if your program becomes more obsolete in the future, then you will be susceptible or vulnerable when it comes to stability and job security. So it's important that you're able to showcase always your value at your in step when it comes to the emerging trends, when it comes to moving people across the globe. But generally speaking, like, I put in some examples here and we'll go through them one by one. But in some cases, given, let's say, the size of your organization, maybe mobility is not very visible when it comes to your key leadership or key business leaders, key stakeholders. So one of the key things that I've seen when it comes to dealing with clients is that the most basic is just to generate awareness, right? So when you showcase your program, you increase the value of mobility, then the leaders will become much more aware of what you're trying to do, that you're able to consult, you're able to advise, not just do the operational work. So that helps make the business understand that, oh, we can actually lean on mobility or HR to help us make decisions for key strategies when it comes to the business. The other side is building credibility. So that's the other part, to showcase that you have the knowledge and skills to support the business. So that's one of the things also that's important when it comes to as a function that you want to showcase your credibility to your leadership and stakeholders so that they can trust you more. And then once they trust you, then you get more support. And how that support translates is that it will either make things easier for you, increase your you need investment, you're trying to increase your headcount, for example, or you want resources so that you can transform your program, put in more tools, build in more capabilities, make your lives easier, then it's important that you have the right support in place. Next is change management. So some of it will be like when you improve processes, if you don't have the right buy-in, then it's hard when it comes to dealing with your relevant stakeholders and convincing them to change. So if you have their trust, you have their buy-in, their support, then it's easier to implement new things. Next, like I mentioned earlier, is obtaining investment. So if you show that you're able to become a trusted advisor, a strategic advisor to your stakeholders, then it's easier to make that business case why you need more people, why you need more resources, why you need investment to improve your program through showcasing like the different ways that you can impact the business. And that's pretty much the end goal, right? So when you create strong contribution, meaningful contributions to the business, then you're able to have like more security. You're able to have like better traction when it comes to the needs of your program, and that will create like a stronger relationship and engagement and collaboration across your program, not only with leadership, but across all your stakeholders, between your assignees, the other HR functions that you're working with, even your compliance teams, having that level of value and peace of mind that you can bring to your stakeholders will generate dividends for you in terms of making life easier as you progress through your program and becoming more strategic. So now that you have like some understanding in terms of like why increase the value of mobility, the next step is, okay, so what's the right approach? Like, where does data come into this, right? So the strategy or the approach is to try and make mobility an appealing investment. So I work with a lot of clients, and a lot of times mobility is seen more as a cost function or a cost center, right? So mobility is expensive. So that's the typical things that we hear from our clients, that why do I pay a lot of money to invest on people when I can just hire locally? So we want to deviate that conversation. Instead, we want to showcase like how mobility can help the business, how mobility can help HR, rather than always focusing on cost. Because the challenge with focusing always on cost is then you end up with that vicious cycle of always minimizing cost. So at the end of the day, when you talk about, oh, we were able to decrease our cost by 10%, then okay, the next year make it 20%, right? So it's a never-ending cycle of cost initiatives, and that will really hamper you. That will really limit your growth as a function. If you're always dealing with cost, then that becomes a conversation of like how low can we go, right? So at the end of the day, mobility is not always expensive. So depending on the location and the benefits that you provide to employees, in some cases, we've seen that moving someone from a low-cost location to a high-cost location can be cheaper compared to hiring someone locally, especially for hard-to-fill or niche type skills that they need. Like if that skill set is hard to find or not readily available in a certain high-cost location, then usually you need to even pay a headhunter. It takes you a long time to find the right talent. And that has cost implications as well for the business. So if you're able to move someone from a low cost to a medium cost or medium cost to a high cost, it's actually even cheaper, especially for one-way moves. Just give them some benefits that just helps them acclimate fast in the new host location, then they're actually good to go. So it's that doesn't have to be expensive. The next is problem solving. So we want, again, to deviate the conversation from cost into how mobility can help solve your problems. So that means deploying talent efficiently across the globe. So depending on the needs of the business, some of their resource needs could be temporary only. In that case, mobility can play a significant part in terms of what's the best way of moving people or with the right skill set to that location to help fill that temporary gap or even permanent type roles. So like the example I shared earlier, like instead of waiting 3 months to hire someone locally, you can move someone within a month that location and get that person up and running fast. So even short term or long term, sometimes like depending on the needs of the business, mobility can actually support and can be quite flexible in terms of moving talent across the globe. And then the last one is I want to emphasize is as a mobility professional, obviously, like some of you may feel that your role is more geared towards compliance, and that's definitely true and fair. In the sense that when someone or the business or someone asks you like, "Hey, can I do this?" It's sometimes like you fall into a trap sometimes where it's a yes or no answer, and if it's a no, then obviously like if the business needs someone and then you say no, then it becomes a barrier for them. You become a barrier for the business. So that kind of sometimes erodes the trust a little bit where they feel like, oh, I don't want to talk to you anymore because you always say no. So I'd rather do some workarounds or find somewhere where I can fall through the cracks and still be able to attain my needs without having to go through you. And that's not something that we want because usually what happens is, let's say they do something illegal or uncompliant, they try to have someone go on business travel illegally, and then that person suddenly gets stopped at the border, and then that person is either deported or worst case put in prison. Then guess who's the one who needs to fix that? They go to mobility or they go to HR to help fix that. So you, rather than being reactive and wait for something to blow up, it's important to have that strong engagement and collaboration with the business. And how that works is instead of saying no, it's more about, okay, you can't do that now, but here's the interim workaround, or here's a potential solution that you can do instead. So at least you're able to have that consultative type of engagement rather than just saying no and not providing a solution. So you become more collaborative by providing suggestions, options instead of becoming a restriction to the business, and that will help facilitate the movement not only from a people perspective but also like the relationship side. The next is supporting the business. So I always tell people like the role of HR is to help enable the business, right? So it's important that we have a good understanding of the business strategy, what they're planning to do, so that we equip ourselves with the right plan so that we can support that. So sometimes the lack of manpower limit business opportunities. So mobility again can play a significant part in terms of alleviating or addressing those gaps in the business. The other side is also from a talent development standpoint. So mobility can play a strong part in terms of developing future leaders, succession planning, depending on how you kind of control the narrative, right? So what's your goal? What's your purpose of mobility? Like, is it about addressing your skills gaps? Is it about talent development, or is it about resource maximization, right? So we've done some analysis and we've really seen in the market that there's a big skills gap, especially when it comes to IT or tech skills. So if you have, you have very limited skill set and it's only going to grow in the future. So you have to understand like what's the best way so that you can make the most out of your limited resources. And then the last part is we cannot forget about the employees, obviously. So facilitating career growth. So that's one of the key value propositions of mobility is supporting employees towards success. So it's not about giving them all the benefits that it becomes so expensive, but it's about understanding like what's the right package so that they can become productive at the host location, right? So that's about having a good, strong understanding of what kind of benefits, what are the local practices, what do they need to be careful or thoughtful about as they move towards that host location, so that once they come in, it doesn't take a long time for them to acclimate, or it doesn't take a long, or that they don't get distracted by their relocation, that they cannot be productive at work. And then also enabling more work opportunities and exposure. So part of mobility is giving them the options, giving them the flexibility to grow their careers, not only stuck within their own jurisdiction, but even actually growing their careers outside their country. So some of you might be asking now, like, okay, where does data play a part in this? So it's important that you leverage data as you, now that you have a strong understanding of your purpose, right? So, okay, so you decided from the last slide that, oh, I want to focus on talent development, or, oh, I want to focus on addressing skills gaps. Then you have to build your story, your narrative, your insights to build towards that case, so you have a strong brand when it comes to discussing with your business. So it helps build your credibility, your team's credibility, when you have a strong understanding of the data, and then you can then use that data to translate that into the insights that you need, so that it's easier to tell the right story. So here are just some a few examples. So it's definitely not an exhaustive list, but just some of the metrics that I've utilized throughout my career as I try to build those business cases or stories that we used to share either with clients or with key stakeholders. So on the cost side, um, so instead of always looking at like, okay, this is how expensive it is, right? So I try to show like what's the average cost per policy, or by transit lane, when like the home host combination or the job level. So that gives your stakeholders some visibility in terms of, oh, okay, so if I do long term, it will cost like this, but if I do two perm transfers, it will be significantly cheaper, as an example. So that gives, instead of just seeing that, oh, it's so expensive, I don't want to do this anymore, at least it gives them some understanding or some options, or in terms of like what are the other things that they can do, right? So like job levels, then you can get a comparison in terms of, oh, our senior leaders are getting everything, it's so expensive, but the junior employees maybe are not getting enough. Then that's a good conversation to have in terms of understanding your policies as well. The other thing is percentage of cost by benefit. So that gives you a perspective in terms of which are your key cost drivers when it comes to the move. So it could be, let's say, temporary housing, household goods shipment, or maybe some other benefits that you're providing to your employees. And that also can kind of give you some perspective of, okay, where do you need to focus on when it comes to making the most impact? So like, for example, if your DSP cost is not expensive, then it doesn't make sense for you to focus too much on reducing the cost for DSP versus reducing the cost, for example, for temp housing if it's getting very expensive, right? So some of the things that will help you prioritize your work. And then the exceptions. Exceptions is actually very interesting because there's so much you can tell from a storyline perspective just looking at your exception data, because exceptions usually taken for granted. When you talk to the business, they treat exception as ad hoc one-time thing, but you can be surprised of how much it accumulates over time, right? So like small, 1K, 2K, 3K exceptions per employee, but if you're talking about thousands of employees, and you can do the math and understand like how much it will cost the business. So you can understand like certain policy types, maybe let's say if you see that there's a trend of high exception costs, and that gives you a signal that you need to take a look at your existing program and either try to fix the root cause of the situation, or understand whether it's really the case, then you might have to tweak your policy as well and improve the employee experience. And speaking of experience, here are some examples of what you can do, how you leverage metrics from an experience standpoint. So like I know a lot of companies still rely on satisfaction scores, so that's why I wanted to touch on that. But the interesting thing that I did here is I tweaked the conversation a little bit. So rather than just looking at satisfaction scores like point blank, let's more focus on the correlation. So let's look at the correlation of each benefit satisfaction to the overall satisfaction. So what that means is, let's say if I go on a relocation move, and then if I'm happy or I'm very satisfied with my, let's say, DSP services, does that translate to a higher overall satisfaction for the overall move? Or maybe, let's say, if I'm not, or let the other side is, if I'm unhappy, let's say something bad happens with my shipment, someone lost one of my precious things, or broke one of my precious things through the shipment, does that translate to like an overall bad satisfaction score, even if all the other benefits went well? right? So those are some of the things you may want to consider again if you're managing a mobility program, that not all benefits are created equal. So you have to be you have to again focus on more on the low-hanging fruits. Understand which benefits are more significantly important for the assignees or the transferees, and then focus on improving those if you're not doing well. So that if it improves, then the overall experience improves immediately. And then the other side is looking at it from a timeliness standpoint. So one of the things I notice, I enjoy playing around with timeliness. I feel like it's heavily underrated as a metric. So when you look at lead time, responsiveness, you'll be surprised that sometimes how fast you are is more important than the actual the benefit that you get. So I remember I did some analysis before where it showed that, especially for lump sum or allowances, the how fast the assignees get their money is more important for them in terms to their satisfaction as compared to how much they get. So even if you change their allowance from 5,000 to 10,000, but if you give it to them um, from instead of 1 week to 1 month, they will be unhappy. Versus if you change their if you keep their allowance at 5K, but you give it to them within a week, they'll be extremely happy. So that's one of the key things that I noticed as I did my data analytics before. Like timeliness actually plays a huge part when it comes to the satisfaction and the experience. Okay, so as we move forward, like productivity, so one of the key, I guess, big areas of focus when it comes to metrics, there's not a lot of ROI metrics, right? So these are just some examples that I've utilized throughout my career. So looking at, given the restrictions or limitations that we might have, so you can look at performance ratings, you can look at promotion rates, you can look at the business performance during relocation as some of the example productivity metrics that you can then connect to the policy, to the benefits that you're providing, so that you can again build those storylines and narrative and focus more on how to maximize the productivity of the assignees and the employees rather than focusing on costs. And then the last part is agility. So because of the times now, the business pace, now we're seeing a lot more agility metrics, like how fast, how agile our teams becoming, so that you can support the business faster and more flexibly. So one of the examples would be like policy exceptions. Obviously, the more exceptions you have, the longer the process becomes, and you have to get through the right approvals. It takes time, versus if you're able to do it right the first time in terms of the package, then obviously that will make you more agile. Another example would be like lead time from initiation to start date. So you can imagine not only this is like general speak, right? So initiation to start date takes a long time. So if you're able to shorten that, then that allows you to become more agile. But another step you can take further is that you can look at in each phase of the move, right? From initiation to, let's say, cost projection, from cost projection to assignment letter, signature or assignment letter acceptance, and then from acceptance to actual flight, and then from flight to whatever, or to closure of the file. So there's like many things you can play around in terms of understanding the data, where your bottlenecks are from a process standpoint, so that you can then understand how you can improve your processes, or what are the risks and issues that you're seeing in your program that can be updated or improve upon, so that you can become more responsive to your business. And then the last part is the risk indicators. Obviously, like each organization has your own different risk appetites. So it's important that you keep a track to make sure that when you take certain risks when it comes to compliance, sometimes it's like the risk appetite can be high, can be low, but it's important to measure them. So at least you also have a documentation in terms of the decisions that's been made, so that in case there are issues later on, or potential fines or penalties, then you're able to show some documentation in terms of how the decision was made, rather than like finger pointing that, oh, it's mobility's fault because they did not advise us correctly, for example. So it's important for you to understand like what are the potential risks that you might be facing, immigration, tax, etc. So that if there are certain like coming from my own experience as well, right? So if you take certain risks and then uh, let's say there's not a lot of enforcement that happens, and usually sometimes the business can take it for granted. And then they will kind of just treat it as status quo already. But as more people or more assignees flout the rules, for example, then the bigger your risk becomes. So there should be a certain point that you need to kind of measure and assess where, okay, the risk is becoming unbearable or the risk is becoming too high that you need to take some action already. So it's important for you to understand that, and it's part of the value that you bring as a function to advise or consult with your business to say that, hey, we're seeing that before we let it go because there's only one or two people doing that, but now we're talking about hundreds of people, then it becomes a completely different issue. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background in terms of like how data plays a part in terms of the narratives, and then how those storylines and narratives then plays a part towards the purpose or the brand that you want to play into as a function so that you can bring more value to the business and your leadership.
So, Alban, before you move forward, thank you so much to kind of share before we kind of fully harness the data. So, what I hear in the last half an hour is we must really first strategize, looking at what we want out of it, so that we can position mobility as an enabler to the business. There's actually a question from Dozen. So, the question is that from both an HR as well as mobility perspective. So at what stage in the workforce and succession planning should mobility data be introduced for maximum influence?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, right? It's hard to say because as much obviously like the rule of thumb is like the earlier the better. But at the end of the day, it's more about you have to. I'm a believer that like timing plays a huge part as well, right? So you can't go too early to the point that the business hasn't really considered that part yet, but you can't go too late. The decision has been made. So it's more towards finding that middle ground. What's the right step where um, what's the right time when the business starts thinking about like succession planning? And usually that happens towards maybe if it's like a long-term assignment, you're talking about 2 years to 5 years. Maybe towards the after the first year, you can start breaching the topic. But more important than the timing is actually the content, right? So uh, we'll discuss that later on in terms of the case studies. But like as you use your data, you need to be very careful about like the insights that you create out of the data, and you also have to protect yourself by making sure that the data and insights you provide are, I wouldn't say foolproof, but it really connects smoothly to the narrative that you bring, because the last thing you want is that you talk to the business and say that, oh, mobility can play a part in this or can help you with this, and then they will go, yeah, but what you're saying is like it doesn't really connect or it doesn't make sense. Then you kind of do the opposite effect of building your credibility. So what's important is that you need to kind of test the waters first. So I would recommend, especially if you're new, in terms of doing this kind of initiative, is either you find someone who you completely trust or have a great relationship with first, test out some concepts, and then use that person or stakeholder to actually help build your case. Get constructive feedback at the same time, use that person to kind of build momentum, and then let them tell their other peers that, hey, look at what mobility is doing for our BU. They're helping us with our succession planning. They're showing us that, oh, we can't just let someone repatriate and then not have a plan for them. Then they will be like, from the data, it says that within 6 months, 80% of them will be leaving, because then suddenly their marketability increases and then our competitors will just poach them away. Or they leave and then there's a big gap now on the host location because there was no one who can fill that role. Then it's either we have to start discussing, let's just localize that person, or maybe let's already start looking for like the bench to for that person to train, so that once that person goes back, then you have already successor in place. So there are different ways for you to attack it. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that addresses your question.
Yeah, thanks, Alban. I think that is very well said. In fact, there's also another question about data, which is always fluid from Kelly. So example, like the cost data where it is scattered everywhere. So how to improve the efficiency of data collection or
Ah,
even improve that data credibility? Yeah, I think this is dear to
yes.
a lot of our hearts,
Mm.
which will be used for very well-informed metrics analysis.
Yeah, actually, it's a good question, but we actually have that in the next slide. So I don't want to preempt
Great.
that, but I promise we'll tackle that as we go to that slide in terms of the data challenges. Here we go. So yeah, to address your question, I know like it's a big challenge area that we've seen with our with not only like working with clients and coming from my own experience, but yeah, these are some of the typical challenges that you might see, and I'll discuss it one by one and also provide some potential workarounds, right? So the first one always we hear is that, oh, there's no available data, or the data is incomplete or inaccurate. We have big data integrity issues, or we don't have available metrics. So yeah, the good news is you're not alone. The bad news is, well, there's, well, probably not bad news, but good news also is like there's no better time to start than today. So the good thing with data is that, or like if you don't have available data or you haven't started with your data journey, is that at least the expectations are low. So that means you can start slowly. And usually what I do is that if I want to track something and it's not available or the data is not correct, usually I try to keep it small. So what I would recommend to everyone is you don't have to boil the ocean right away. You start small, you do a small pilot first, either a small BU, focus on a small location that's meaningful. Obviously, you can go to somewhere where people don't take it, like won't take it seriously enough. So you have to find that right balance of, oh, if I analyze this data, will it create impact or will it create value? Then you start collecting manually. And then once you do some kind of data consolidation, data collection, then you play around with that data and then do some analysis. And if you're able to create some interesting insights that you can then pilot test to your stakeholders, and if they like it, then that will help bring that investment for you. And then that will help get the buy-in that you need so that you can make it bigger and kind of do a bigger transformation project. So yeah, I guess the unfortunate truth is that there's no, I guess, easy way to do this. Obviously, you have um, products that are available in the market that could help you, but the challenge always like garbage in, garbage out, right? So if your data is not great in terms of data integrity, even if we have the fanciest tool in the market, you have all these AI capabilities, it won't really bring you too much benefit if it's not accurate. So that's where I encourage you to focus first on making sure you have, even if it's just a small subset of data, but make sure it's 100% clean, complete. Start playing around with that data, showcase some of the insights that you can generate to your stakeholders, and then that will then create their own momentum and bring in the right investment for your program. Okay. The other challenge we see is different data sources. Although this one, because of technology recently, it's become much lesser of an issue. So usually, like you have your like assignment pro, your initiation tool, and then you have other data sources within HR like payroll data, success factors, workday, especially if you want to become more ambitious and then connect it to like performance ratings, promotion rates, right? Like what we discussed earlier, then you have more data sources. And sometimes it's not easy to integrate that. But the good news is some of the software that we have, like Power BI, has become increasingly smart in terms of being able to integrate different data sources. So now it's like you can just download all these different data sources through like a CSV file, put it in a SharePoint, and then it can Power BI or like even your desktop, and then Power BI can actually just read that data, and then you can easily do the pivots that you need easily through Power BI. So that becomes like more of less of an issue now. The other side, although, is that no access to some data. So in that case, you want to analyze, like you want to get your hands on like payroll data, but they don't want to give you access or you don't have access. Then you need to start collaborating with the right people, right? So the one of the things I learned in my career is that if you like, there's always a win-win, right? So it's more of just how you articulate it to your stakeholders. Like, hey, let's partner together. Like, if we're able to do this project well, then we both look good. Um, so usually, like that's if you phrase it like what's in it for them, then you can actually cover a lot of hurdles when it comes to that. Next is the lack of interaction with key stakeholders. So you might feel like, oh, our function is very operational, very transactional. So there's not a lot we can do. Yeah, so what you do is that you have to start from somewhere. If you want to become a strategic function, if you don't do anything today, it won't change, right? So you have to start somewhere, and then that's when you have to start building those business cases, showcasing like small stories here and there, like, hey, this is something that we can bring value to you. So you have to, it's more of a branding exercise, right? So you have to start from, especially if you don't have that relationship, you have to start in terms of just having water cooler chats, knowing the right people, and you go from there. Then the last is lack of resources. So we're too busy doing operational work. Mobility is not our core work. Aside from mobility, we also do comp and ben, we also do rewards, we also do other HR functions, and sometimes we don't have the expertise or capability. So yeah, again, there's no easy way to go over this. If you want to become a strategic function, if you want to increase your value, you have to do the investment. So you have to do the hard work, and then that's when you can like slowly kind of progress from there. So again, yeah, just to reiterate, like if you don't do anything, you don't change anything, then yeah, don't expect anything to change within your function, and that will make you like vulnerable in the future. Okay. So before we go to the next slide, let's maybe do another quick poll to see in terms of maybe for you, what are the main challenge that you're seeing with your program? While we're waiting, are there any questions?
Yes, Alban, I believe there's one in the Q&A. Okay,
Okay.
so anyway, the question is, I'm asking from a DSP perspective, as I do not have any experience working in corporate. Cost projection is usually available on a factual figure. However, benefits are usually a perspective. Wouldn't mobility encounter challenges in convincing business towards accepting mobility service costs?
No, that's a very fair question. And yeah, I mean, I have seen that in the past where because of like the lack of availability of data, or maybe in some cases, like the data integrity part could play a big issue as well. So what I've done as well as a workaround is to do some estimates, right? So do like, as you do your pilot, you can also make some estimates like, oh, 20% of my cost is actually DSP just for this small sample size. And you can make that general assumption that for the life cycle of the movie, it will be 20%, those kind of things. So yeah, honestly, like there's no hard science behind it. It's like data analytics is probably like partly science and partly an art, right? So I feel like it's more about not only like how you analyze the data, but how you articulate the insights coming from the data. So you have to also take some time to put in like the careful thought in terms of like what do you want to portray, what's your hypothesis, what do you want to do with the data so that you can build the right narratives around it, and then you can do like when you analyze the data, you analyze it scientifically where it's hard to dispute, but at the same time that you're able to connect it to the right storylines that you want to bring. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. Okay, looking at the now the results of the poll. So it seems like majority of you have issues more on the different data sources, which I said earlier is actually not as big of a complication now, which is good news. So that means if you're able to leverage like existing products in the market, then you should be able to address this. And then the other one is the lack of resources. So one of the things I recommend is that you can rely on your if you don't have the resources or you don't have the capabilities, then you can leverage your provider network, your supplier network as well. So you'll be surprised like the expertise that they can provide. And then also your like the broader network of mobility. So you'll be surprised how helpful the community in the industry is. So you can partner up with people, have mentorship opportunities, ask the right thought leaders. Even myself, feel free to reach out to me. Let's bounce ideas. I'll be happy to help you out. So just conscious of time, I know we have 10 minutes remaining. I'll just go through a few case studies in terms of my own experience of how you apply data to build, again, the purpose that you try to bring. So as an example here, so what we did here is to use mobility to fill skills gaps. So this, the right side, this is like what's in it for your stakeholders, like what's like why is it important for them. So for mobility, it's to increase your value as a talent strategy rather than an ad hoc function. For talent acquisition, it helps improve their time to fill. So especially for hard to fill jobs, if you're able to move someone, then that reduces their time to fill, and then that increases their talent pool as well, rather than just focusing on the local population. And then for the business, sometimes it can be cheaper. And then you're also able to bring the talent faster so that that person can start generating revenue or becoming productive. Then that addresses your needs faster. So the main steps here is, number one, identify the key locations and hard to fill positions within your organization. Next is to assess the one-way cost, the permanent transfer cost of those who are immigration friendly. Obviously, like if it takes 4 months to get a work permit, then not really worth exploring. But if it takes weeks, maybe 1 month, then can be a feasible solution. And then setting up that talent pipeline from cost-effective locations. So in terms of like the steps that I use in terms of gathering the data. So first is looking at the hiring trends. Like if you're a mobility practitioner, you can connect with your recruitment teams, find those key hiring locations, and then find those roles which takes a long time to hire talent. That's a good indication that this could be the niche skill sets that that mobility can focus on. And then identify your talent pool. So find locations where there's a high number of those types of roles, and then validate that with the hiring report. So if you see, for example, like in Singapore, let's say we don't have, there's a lot of IT roles that are open, taking 3 months to fill. Then you see that, oh, in Malaysia, actually, there's a lot of people in your organization in Malaysia with IT on a similar role, and then it only takes 30 days to hire them. That means there's a good supply. Then you do a business pitch to show to ask your business partner or the business leader, does it make sense? Are you interested? If they say yes, then you can do the next step, which is, okay, let's look at the visa and tax regulations, whether it makes sense, it's cheaper, get a high-level cost projection to move someone one way, and then compare that with hiring locally. And then if the cost increment is marginally the same or even cheaper, then you can do a pilot test. So identify the right location and role first for your pilot, get the right support from the business, and then showcase your success. So if you become successful in that pilot, it's easier then to build that story to other business units afterwards to say like, oh, you were successful here, would you be interested? And then you will generate momentum from there. Another example is for talent development. So this one is that you want to create a talent development program that where employees can actually move a little bit, like 6 months stints here, 6 months stints in another location. So for mobility, it's about like another way to apply mobility. For talent management, it's new way to develop employees, and you can even have the benefits tagged to their performance. And then for the business, it's about succession planning, increasing your bench, increasing their exposure so that their experience becomes accelerated, and then they'll be ready for more senior positions faster. So in terms of the approach that I took here, so like again, similar approach, build the initial business case first. So measure your current mobile employees or assignees and see whether they perform better as compared to the local population. If yes, then that could be your initial storyline. And then you identify the targets. And then define your program details. So do some research on what's out there in the market in terms of talent development, and then do a feasibility assessment in terms of the costing, how easy it is to administer, and then again, do a pilot test. So I don't recommend doing a big bang right away. Pilot test always helps you iron out the kinks and some of the issues that may be unforeseen. Okay. So I'll jump to, I know we have 5 minutes remaining, so I'll run through like the last example. So, but this one is more about just improving your mobility package so that employees can become more productive. So again, pushing that discussion from cost to more towards productivity and ROI. And then this is the approach in terms of reviewing the productivity of your employees, identify those who are struggling, adjusting their support, like identifying like what kind of support would help them improve and acclimate better, look at the trends, and then update the support that you're providing to their employment so that they can generate more value and become more productive. Yes. So just some final thoughts coming from our session today is that as you've seen, like there's a lot, like the economy is becoming much more uncertain. So cost is becoming or like money is becoming scarce, right? So we're not seeing a lot of companies who are overly extravagant or generous anymore. So how you make decisions is through data. So I would say like data is the new currency of the business now. So whatever you do, whatever you pitch, you have to leverage data to build yourself up, to build your business case, and then invest on your program's branding. So that means looking at it in terms of like whatever you do is like you have limited interface with your leadership, with your business leaders. So try to make the most out of it. Identify the right storylines that will help build your brand. If you show them that you can generate this value, you can become a trusted advisor, a strategic advisor for them, that will stick with them and that will become the brand of your team rather than a team that's more on the operational or transactional side. Number three is always take a look at your purpose. So articulate your purpose, focus on that. So don't just arbitrarily use data and then get random stories together. Always focus on what you want to achieve, what's the brand you want to achieve, and then focus your efforts towards building that so that you can become known about that. And then the last one is don't hesitate to leverage your providers and network. So especially if you have limited resources or you feel like you don't have enough knowledge, take advantage of leveraging your providers and also looking in terms of outside the industry and trying to partner up. Okay, yeah, so that's the last of my slide. Hopefully, you've gotten some good ideas, or hopefully I was able to inspire you a little bit in terms as you go through your journey. But I know we have a couple of minutes remaining, so just want to see if there are any last questions that I can help address. Okay, if there's none, then thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you, and I'll pass it back to Shumin to close.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alben. So I think by now we all know that data is no longer just a reporting tool like Excel that we always have been using. I think certainly very inspiring to hear you mentioning how this can be really a strategic lever, and I feel that this is really a great start as we continue to enhance the journey. So I think some of the key takeaways, if I were to summarize, is really before we kind of fully harness the data, we must first be able to strategize what do we want, what is our purpose, right, of positioning mobility to become that enabler. And again, thank you for some of these questions. I really love the questions being asked. And I think one of the key things that Alben also did remind us is it's also not just about the timing, but rather it's the content. And I actually did learn a new language today, so I'm going to take it away with me where data is going to be the new currency of the business. So hopefully this sticks with me, and I can start to practice this, some of this as we go along. And in fact, I just want to also take this last opportunity to remind those of you who are ATMA members, we do have this Atmosphere platform that is actually meant for members. And again, as I was hearing some of the questions, I thought that this would be a great space for us to continue the engagement. So, we can actually have some of you to start forming a working group, so that we can actually spark some of the ideas, the challenges, or even share some of the best practices that you have been working on as you work on this data-driven mobility. And for those of you who are not there and you would like to be part of it, please reach out to us and let us know. So once again, thank you, Alben. Thank you so much. Thanks for all of you who joined us, on your beautiful, be it morning, afternoon today. So thanks, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at our conference.
Thank you.